So for today, we're going to be talking about portraits, but not just any type of portrait. On occasion, as photographers, we are tasked with grabbing portraits of somebody on the spot in a weird location with horrible lighting, often with a subject that only has a couple of minutes of time for you to take that photo. I want you to think more like the run and gun type portraits. And as examples today, we're going to talk about those type of portraits that you take of bands backstage. Let's go behind the shot. Hi, welcome to Behind the Shot. I'm Steve Brazill. This is the show where we try and get inside the mind of great photographers by taking a closer look behind one of their shots, or today, a bunch of their shots. Try and get an idea of why they made the choices that they did, from conception to completion and all those challenges that happen in between. It's been a while since I did a show. Let me explain for those of you that have been wondering where Steve was. I spent most of September traveling Central Europe, 32 days, 5 or 6 countries, had an absolute blast. But then when I got back, I didn't record right away because, you've got that post-vacation catch-up time. So glad I've got today's show. This is a show I've actually kind of wanted to do for a long time. You'll understand when we get into it. And then I've got another one set to record. So there will be a couple of shows coming out. Thank you very much for being patient and waiting for that. This show, as with every show that I do, does have a blog post associated with it where I write some stuff about my guest. I've got a small sample gallery of my guest's work there. If you head to behindtheshot.tv, you can find a blog post for every episode that I do. And the video is also embedded in those blog posts, so you can watch it there as well. You can also watch it on YouTube, or this is a podcast first and foremost. So wherever you get your podcasts, this show is available in 2 forms. You can get an audio-only version if you're doing Spotify or Amazon Music or Google or something like that. If your podcast outlet of choice supports video, like Apple Podcast does, this show is also available as a video podcast, and I put the podcast up on YouTube as well. For those of you watching on YouTube, if you do like the content, please hit the like and subscribe button, leave a comment, tell me, shows that you want to watch or what you think of this show and the guest. And I should also mention this. If you're watching on YouTube, I do have people comment periodically that, hey, the YouTube thumbnail or poster said we're going to talk about backstage band portraits, and you spent 20 minutes interviewing the photographer first. It's a podcast. So I always start with a getting to know my guest section so that you understand why you should listen to them. Then we get into the topic at hand, and then I have some Q&A stuff that I do at the end. But I have timestamp markers in the description on YouTube. So if you don't want to watch one particular part, jump to whatever you want to. I am absolutely fine with that. So let's dive in. I'd like you to welcome to the show a New Orleans-based photographer, and I think one of the best working music photographers out there right now, Jenn Devereaux. Jenn, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Did I pronounce your last name right? I meant to check it before we went live.
You did.
Okay.
You absolutely did, and that's a hard one, so I appreciate that.
I practiced it a couple of times, and I'm like, I'm going to ask her ahead of time, and I forgot to, so I'm glad I got it. So, Jenn, I have followed you. I mentioned I'm a fan of your work, and I've followed you for quite some time. I think I found you because of our mutual acquaintance, Todd Owyoung, who I finally was able to meet face-to-face when he was out here doing a Nikon workshop. Folks, if you don't follow Todd, especially if you're into music photography, follow Todd Owyoung. He's an amazing live music photographer, tour photographer. He's also the photographer for The Tonight Show, does workshops for Nikon. He's a Nikon ambassador. Todd's a great guy. Had dinner with him out here. So follow him. Let's start with that. But that's kind of how I found you, was you worked festivals and do work festivals with Todd a lot. So I want to start there as we kind of get to know you, because I think of you as a music concert photographer. Researching you, I found something interesting. You got into music photography, I think, the way a lot of people do. You took a point and shoot into shows. Is that correct?
That is correct. I actually started about 16 years, well, prior to 16 years ago, because I would go to these festivals, and at the time, this is going to really date me because I'm old, but at the time they would allow disposable cameras in the festivals, but digital cameras, like little point and shoots, were still somewhat new. So they wouldn't allow those in the festivals. So what I would do is I would buy a disposable camera, take it out of the box, and slide it into the disposable camera box and glue it shut and take it into the festival. And so I'd fight my way to the front just like everybody else did. And, I knew that it was that I wanted to be a content photographer because I could not pay attention to the show because I was so worried about getting just an amazing shot. That was all I cared about. So I knew then that's what I wanted to do for a living.
That's funny that you say that because I've often wondered if every music photographer is that way. When I'm in a pit, yes, I'm listening to the band, and yes, in my head, I'm either singing if I know the songs or I've got the rhythm in my head. I love music, but all I can think of is, man, I hope that shot came out.
Oh, I know. And then like going to like concerts and festivals like just for fun is so hard for me because I want to be shooting the whole time and I'd be like, "Oh, I could have gotten a great shot there," or, that would have been a great image or, whatever, but it's so hard as a concert photographer now just to go to shows and enjoy them.
It's funny. We were, this is a total sidetrack rat hole here, but a year or so ago, what was it, 2023, we went to Scotland and Ireland. And when we were in Dublin, we were thinking of things to do. And before we had left, my wife said, the Goo Goo Dolls are going to be there. We should go see them. I'm like, okay, let's make, buy some tickets for the Goo Goo Dolls. I enjoyed it. We were there with my kid as well. And I'm watching the show, but all I could think was, I want to be up there in the pit. Like I had trouble watching the show because all I wanted was photographs. I tried taking them on my phone. Of course, they didn't come out well from far away. You mentioned you knew you were going to be a music photographer, but I'm gonna go back to research here. On your website, you have galleries for music, portraits, marketing and lifestyle, and weddings, which many of those overlap, but some of them did kind of surprise me. If you could only photograph one moving forward, would it be music or do you consider yourself a wedding or portrait photographer?
It would 100% be music, and the only reason I ever did weddings was to be able to afford gear for my for my job.
Okay.
I've since actually retired from wedding photography. I need to actually take that down for my website, but I like to have that. I have a variety of different images on there. I do not do weddings anymore because that is the most stressful thing I've ever done in my life. You just that you'll never be able to recreate that moment. So if
Yep.
there is a corrupt memory card or you just miss the shot, it's just that stress is too much for me. So I had to put that aside.
I had a wedding photographer friend back in the film days, and seriously, I still think he's probably the best wedding photographer I've ever seen. And he went to work at Sears instead. And I went, why? He said, I've gotten to the point where the stress is so high when I take a picture and I don't know if it came out, or in this case, if a memory card is going to corrupt, that I can't take it anymore. And people ask me, is music photography or wedding photography harder? And my response, being a music photographer, is I think music photography is the hardest type of photography that there is. I'm not talking, going to the South Pole or something, but it's one of the hardest types out there. But wedding photography is hands down the most stress-inducing type of photography
100%.
that there is. You've got some interesting clients. You work for Uber, Live Nation, like I've done house shooting for Live Nation as well. You're a house shooter for Live Nation now, right?
Yes, I actually work for a few different venues. Right now, it's the Fillmore New Orleans, which was the first venue to really give me a shot. I still work for them, and I've actually branched out, and I'm also working for the Smoothie King Center, which also it's ASM Global. So they have the Smoothie King Center, the Superdome, Champion Square. And then occasionally the Sanger in New Orleans and House of Blues, which House of Blues is actually the sister venue to the Fillmore in New Orleans. So I'll occasionally do those as well.
Okay. You work for Showtime. You do the iHeartRadio Festival again with Todd Owyoung, and also Brian Friedman is on that team, right?
Yes. Yeah. One of my favorite festivals. I love iHeart Festival. Absolutely one of the most fun festivals I could ever be a part of, honestly. And you can't beat that lighting there because it's set for TV. Oh, it's just the best.
Yeah. Someday I will photograph that festival, I hope. You have had work in Rolling Stone, Billboard, People, Forbes, Entertainment Tonight. Part of the reason I do this whole get to know Jenn thing at the start is because I'm always curious. When somebody reaches the level of success and recognition in music photography that you have, it ain't easy, right? It's not easy to get to the point. Very few people get their photos in Rolling Stone or get to be on a house team, a festival team for iHeart Music Festival. Looking back at the years you've been doing this, is there a key moment you can point to that stands out as a turning point in your career?
Yes, actually, I would honestly say that iHeart was the turning point for me because, and it actually happened on such like it was such kismet because I was working for I was doing freelance for my friend Karen's blog, and she's based in Las Vegas. Um, one of the editors for iHeart, Catherine Tyler, was looking for someone to live edit, which is essentially they have photographers and the memory cards are being run to you while you edit in real time, and so they can post it on socials as quick as possible. So they needed an editor to do that. And they thought that I was based in Vegas because I was working for my friend's blog. They reached out to me, and I was like, "Yeah, I'd love to." And then when we kind of like agreed on everything, I asked, okay, so what about the travel? And they were like, well, we thought you were in Vegas, but we have enough in the travel budget. We'll have you on. So that was like a turning point. I did editing for a couple of years, and I just happened to like reach out to the editor and say, look, I know that this is a coveted role to be a photographer at this festival, but if you ever have an opening, I would love to do it. The very next year, I got to be a photographer, and that has just been such like that's opened up a lot of doors for me because that just is people kind of see iHeart as being kind of an elite festival. And that kind of opened up some more doors for me for other festivals and photo teams on other festivals. So
I love the way that worked out because after you discussed it all and they went, oh, you're not in Vegas, the fact that you were still able to just say, okay, what about travel? I mean, I think not enough people understand how important just communication is, right? It's business relationships shouldn't be contentious. They're just information. And the fact that you just very matter of factly, what about travel? How are we going to handle that? And then, look, I don't know it's a coveted role, but I'd like the opportunity. Being an advocate for yourself, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I think is so important. I love that you did that. There is a question I ask of every guest that I have. And I will be honest, I ask it of almost every guest now, but there are specific guests that I'm always really intrigued in my head what they're going to say for the answer to this. And you're one of those because when I look at your work, you have, I'm trying to think of the word I'm looking for. You have a vibrancy, and I don't mean color vibrancy. I mean, you have an emotional vibrancy in almost every photo I see of yours, live music photo.
Thank you.
I mean, there's an energy that comes out of your photos that often doesn't exist, even though the photo could be great. It doesn't have that kind of energy. So I'm curious, not music, just in general, what makes a great photo great?
Wow, that is a great question. I think to me, I grew up where I kind of lived in a strict household. My mom really didn't like me listening to some music, so I had to sneak a lot of music. So when I got to go to my first concert, it was such like an experience. And all I had known about live music was through magazines I had seen. I'd never kind of gotten to experience anything live like that. So when I got to go to my first concert, that was such an experience. And so seeing that played out from an image to a live performance, that was important for me to kind of like have that same feeling for other people when they see my images, that they are like, I feel like I'm there. Like if I can't be there, I want to feel like I was there.
I like that. I like that a lot, actually. Do you remember what the concert was? The first one?
So so my first concert was New Kids on the Block.
Okay.
My mom did take me to that one. So that was not a band concert. So but my first I think my first as an adult really getting to pick the music that I wanted to and go on my own, that was Horde Festival in the
Oh,
90s.
wow.
It was in Alabama. It was Blues Traveler. It was Eagle Eye Cherry. It was a bunch of good 90s bands, but just being there was just such a cool experience. And just, I felt so grown up because I was there. I was in high school, but I felt grown up.
So okay, now let's take it into music. What makes a great music photo great?
I think capturing that energy is so important because, I mean, an artist can stand behind a microphone and it could just be them standing behind a microphone, but if you change that angle just so you can see the image, you could have the fans in the background. It's a completely different image. And I think that it's important for photographers to kind of look at it from other angles and not just because I will say when I first started shooting, it was like I'm gonna zoom in as far as I can so it looks like I'm right there. So all my friends will know that I was right up in their nostrils. But now I see it as a like I want them to see so much more of it. So I think that's important. I think it's just kind of making sure that energy is there. You're capturing, the whole like concert itself, embodying that whole experience.
I agree. I always think of it as this. I want to give viewers of my photos one of a couple of different possibilities. Either I want them to see something that they saw, the focal length, the fact that they saw more than a tight face, but they saw in their eyes, they see the whole stage or a couple of things. I want to give them the ability to relive their moment, but I also want to give them the ability to see from a seat they didn't have. That's where, to me, the onstage or backstage stuff comes from, so that they can go, oh, that's what that's like, right? And people who weren't there, I want to give them the feeling that they wanted to be there. It's interesting because something happened to me I just shot Mayhem Festival here in Southern California, the first Mayhem Festival since whatever it was, 2016. And another friend of mine was there, Liz, and she was shooting for the festival. And something she relayed to me was interesting. And I would be remiss if I didn't bring it up with you, because you are one of the photographers that, again, Todd Owyoung has a blog called I Shoot Shows. And he did a blog post called Women in Music Photography You Should Know. You were one, along with a lot of other phenomenal photographers, one of those people that he mentioned. Most people, most guys and ladies, obviously, in music photography know that women face different challenges, very unique challenges in music photography. And in this one story, it was something to the effect of where this photographer was going on stage shooting for the festival, and security said there's no girlfriends allowed on stage right now. And she was a house photographer, right? She had credentials. I mean, my God, man, they say what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And yet that still happens. And I'm curious, because I think it will benefit everybody to know. Obviously, it still exists, probably always will exist. Is it getting better how women are treated in this particular genre of photography?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say, I started back in 2008, and just even the sheer amount of women in the pit has increased dramatically. I've had my fair share of misogyny in the concert photography realm, but I have seen it get significantly better. I mean, we've got a
Good.
ways to go for sure. I mean, especially with representation and things like that, for minorities and,
Right.
females and everyone. But I mean, I do see it getting better. And I'm very appreciative of that. And to be honest, Todd is such an advocate for women, and it's for him to have those blog posts about that has really put eyes on a lot of women photographers, and that's a huge deal. And I will forever be thankful for him. He's always been such a good advocate. So, yeah, if you haven't checked out Todd's blog, I Shoot Shows, you definitely need to go check that out.
Yeah, and I think it takes men that are in the photo pit being vocal and being an advocate and saying, I think the person in front of me is one of the best music photographers out there, not one of the best female music photographers, right?
Mm-hmm.
This person can execute any job that you give them including shooting a festival like iHeartRadio. And I think it's important that there are people out there saying that over and over, so that the people who do the hiring, hopefully it bleeds over to them at some point and they go, you know what, let's take a look at something other than the norm that we've been doing.
Yes. And that's the thing, is like, it's just being vocal, and referrals are huge. Like
Right.
that, a lot of the gigs that I've gotten, I have to thank Todd for, because he's always been someone that's in my corner. He's a really good friend. And having someone just refer you for gigs is such a big deal in this industry, where networking is so huge. And sometimes it's slow, right? So sometimes you don't know what your next gig is going to be. So to have like someone that's constantly like referring you, and then the next person refers you, that's huge in this industry. So one way that people can advocate for women is just referrals. That's
Right.
huge for us.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the number of gigs I've gotten from some of the house photographer gigs I've gotten are because there was somebody that was a house photographer there, and they put a gig list in front of them and they said, I can't do this date. Do you have any suggestions? Yeah, call Steve, right? In this business, referrals from people that a client trusts are
Mhm.
gold, right? They want to get somebody in they know can hit the ground running, is going to act professional, dress professional, behave professional. It really matters. Before we get into the backstage portraits, for those of you that have been waiting for the backstage portrait commentary, here we go. I just again want to remind you, if you go to behindtheshot.tv, not .com, behindtheshot.tv, you can find a blog post for this show. Some of Jenn's photos are there. I write a little blog post about Jenn. If you want to find me, go to stevebrazill.com. I'm at Steve Brazill on all socials. I don't really use Facebook, but if you want to go to Facebook, where's my Facebook link? I think it's right there. If you want to go to Facebook, Instagram, any of those, it's at Steve Brazill almost everywhere. Facebook, it's at Steve Brazill Photography. I'm on Mastodon now. I'm on Blue Sky now. Hit me up anywhere. If you are watching on YouTube and you like this show, please hit like, hit subscribe, leave a comment. It would be much, much appreciated. In fact, leave a review if you're listening on a podcast, wherever you get the podcast. That also does help in a lot of different ways. I want to approach the conversation we're about to have on backstage portraits or run and gun portraits. I want to approach it in kind of a methodical order. I want to talk about how, you or somebody gets gigs that put you in a position to take backstage portraits or do that type of thing, how you prepare for it before you go to the festival. You're flying to Las Vegas. What is your thought process based on the artist that you may end up shooting? Camera gear, location scouting. Subjects have very tight schedules and you got to deal with that, and you've got to communicate with them, and some need communication to pose them and some know what they're doing. Taking the shot, culling, editing, delivering to the client. I want to kind of go through all of those. So let's start. And again, for those of you that are used to me describing a photo, too many photos today. Not going to happen. Go to the blog post. You can see those there. So let's start with this. How we know how you got iHeartRadio. We went through that. But in general, how do you get a job with a festival team where they're going to assign you a stage usually, right? And in the case of the shots, all the shots we're going to talk about today were taken at this year's When We Were Young Fest in Vegas, which I was at. I wish I'd seen you there. It would have been great. How do you get that assignment to take those backstage portraits?
So with When We Were Young Fest, I actually wasn't on the festival team for this one, but I was there for media. So what that typically looks like, I was shooting for Substream magazine, and what that looks like is usually about, I would say, the week before the festival media team will send out an email with the artist publicist list. And so what I end up doing for like a few days is I'll make a template email, and then I'll send it out to as many of the people on the list that I want to photograph. Send it to the publicist. Basically, it's like, hey, I'm with Substream Magazine. Here's a link to the website. This is the stats on the magazine. Would love to do a quick portrait, 5 minutes or less, depending on your time. And usually sends out. Sometimes I won't get anything. Usually for this festival, they've been really good about responding pretty quickly. I think the only two that did that said, yeah, that's not happening was My Chemical Romance and I think Fall Out Boy never responded. Of course,
Right.
it's really hard to get like the headliners. But you got to shoot your
You could
shot,
have
right?
predicted those two too, right?
Yes, but
Yeah.
I am always going to shoot my shot because you just never know.
Right.
But yeah, so it's just like sending emails out and getting those scheduled. And of course, you never really know until like either the day before or the day of really what the band schedule is going to be like. So it is pure chaos because it's hard for me, for someone who's a planner. That's really hard for me because one, I not only am I there to do portraits, but I'm also there to write an article about the whole festival and also get as many live performances of bands as possible as well. And for When We're Young Fest, that is like 50 plus bands in
Right.
one day. So that is chaotic. And the stages are so spread out. And then once you get out towards them in the nighttime, whereas the headliners, you cannot get out from the crowd. So you have to plan accordingly. That was hard. But it just worked out where a lot of different bands ended up in the tent. So I ended up getting probably double the amount of portraits that I requested just because there were bands in there and I just happened to pull their manager aside, be like, hey, would you mind letting me take a couple of pictures while we're here? So
Yeah, again, you got to be an advocate for yourself and be professional. It was funny because I was at When We Were Young Fest and I made a mistake. And this is one of the things where the planning comes in. So ADTR, who I was there to shoot, was on, I think it was the purple stage. There were two stages side by side. And I misread the name and I came out the wrong side and the pits were connected. They wouldn't let me go through. So I had to walk all the way around the back of both stages or the front of both stages again to get where I needed to be before they hit the stage. I had like 3 minutes. It was insane how crazy it is. And the backstage is nuts. You have to take from where we were, I had to take a tram to get to the actual festival grounds where the stages were that made like 3 stops. Like it takes a while, but it pays off, right? Because you get shots like this. So you said you're a planner. And I'm curious when you're taking, shots like this, Pierce the Veil, what is your planning? How do you prepare not so much for this shot, but using When We Were Young Fest as an example, did you do research on the bands? What kind of things they do in portraits? I mean, how did you approach, okay, I'm going to have 20 seconds with these guys to try and make a shot that hopefully their PR likes even and might license from me. So what is your prep before you ever get there? What does that look
that's
like?
a good question. Yeah, I am always on Instagram. I'm always looking at styles that the bands like for things and what they typically do in other portraits and things like that. Not necessarily because I want to copy it, but just to kind of get their vibe. This particular shot is actually kind of funny because I had reached out to the publicist for Pierce the Veil, and I had thought that I had sent the email like the week of, and I did not send it like I thought it did. And I was most excited to get their portrait. And when I finally realized that I hadn't sent the email, I emailed the publicist like immediately. And I'm like, so sorry, this is late. Just seeing if we can get something in. And they were like, well, their schedule's already full. I'm so sorry. And I was like, I understand. So I happened to be in the media tent where all the bands are kind of interviewing and taking portraits and such. And I saw one of my photographer friend Skylar, and she said, I was like, oh, what are you doing today? What do you got lined up for Yes. No. Skylar, if you follow her on Instagram, it's Sad Punk.
Okay.
She's great. I asked her who she was shooting in the tent, and she said Pierce the Veil. I was like, oh, I missed out on that one, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what time is your portrait? And she told me what time it was. And I was like, you know what? When you get your portrait done, I'm going to see if I can talk to the tour manager while I'm there and see if I can get something in. They were waiting to that she had gotten hers done and they were waiting for someone else that was late to their portrait. And I was like, look, I was like, I know, I talked to the publicist. I was late getting the email in. Is there any way that we can get a quick, like, I will take literally 10 seconds. That's all I need. And she was like, I don't know. Let me contact the publicist. And the publicist never got back to her on it, the tour manager. So she was like, you know what? Let's do it. Let's just do it real quick. And I was like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. And they were already outside waiting for somebody else. And so I had been doing most of my portraits inside. So I had to quickly change all my settings for a bright sunny day with a flash. And this was literally about 10 seconds of shooting. That's all I was given. So that's it.
Do you know your exposure data on this?
Yes. So that one, I believe, ISO 80, because I was panicking.
Right.
And then I think my shutter was 1/160th and 14 millimeter. So it's a wide shot. F 5.0. Those are my camera settings for that. It was literally, I was also in manual mode on my flash. It was one of the quickest portraits I've ever done in my life. And I panicked. I didn't even look at my camera to see if I got anything because I was just like, I don't want to keep them too much longer. I was just lucky to even get to take a picture. So I was excited about it.
Okay. I love the way that it came to be because you do what I phrase, set yourself up for success. You were in the right place. You had pre-talked to the tour manager to try and make it happen, made him understand. You understand if it can't happen, right? That is, you put yourself in a position to succeed. The example I always use for this, when I was a house photographer, I'm curious if you actually get this. When I was a house photographer for a local casino, they got big shows. And I shot the meet and greet, which was the owners of the casino, the tribe members would do a meet and greet. And I had to shoot the meet and greet. So I had all access. Because I had all access, but I still only got 3 songs, I would go stand in the wings. And I knew other people would take their gear off and then watch the show. And I'm like, no, I'm not taking my gear off. I'd leave my gear on. I'd stand in the wings and I'd just fold my arms. Every single show, kid you not, every show, a tour manager would come up and go, what are you doing? I'm not shooting, but look, I have all access. I'm allowed to be here. Every time they would go, I don't care, take something. And I happened to be in the wings for artists who specifically said there's no photos from the wings. Okay, I'm not taking photos from Jason Bonham was one of those. And I would be there and they'd say, go ahead, we don't care. And I'd end up getting shots. I've licensed shots because I set myself up in that position. And that's what you did by being there and being proactive about it. I love that. Next shot I want to talk about, I'm going to bring up another shot, but I want to talk about gear for a second before I do, because clearly this is artificial light. This is outdoors in a random spot. And yet this could go in a magazine as a promo shot, right? So I love that you can do a run and gun shot and get something commercially usable. That's key. What gear are you using? What camera do you use, first of all?
So I have 2 bodies, but for this, I believe I was using my Nikon D850. I have a Z8 as well. But I really, for some reason, I love my wide 14-24 on my D850. That was my camera gear. And then also I have a recently purchased, I actually bought this just for when we were Young Fest because I wanted to try something new. I have a Godox 8100 Pro, and that's like yes, exactly. That flash has been amazing. Something cool about that flash is that you can get like, hold on, I actually have it right here. It has like, it's magnetic, so you can put little domes and stuff on it like that. I love this because I was able to use that in conjunction with the Angler Fastbox 24-inch. That modifier is such a easy and quick, let's see, I don't know if I can get it on camera and show you, but the way that it literally just folds so quickly. And that's it. And it's like,
it's done?
It's done. And that's
and that's the thing I was wondering. So that has a tripod mount on it that works as a handle. Oh, and it just sticks in there.
Yeah, it just magnetizes in there.
Oh, it's
So it's
magnet
pretty
inside?
amazing. Yeah, there's an attachment in here that magnetizes specifically to this flash, and it has a
Oh.
lock on it, so you don't have to worry about it falling out.
Oh, I dig
It's
that.
great.
I dig that. And
And
then
I
what the
actually got that idea from someone who was doing I saw at an event, and he didn't have the softbox, but he had the Godox on a handle like this.
right. That's what I was going
And
to
he was
ask because
taking
the Godox
pictures.
being round, I didn't see a handle.
Yeah, so you can like just put that in the tripod um part of it, and you can hold it, and he was just taking pictures of like marketing setups, like tables and such. And I went up to him and I'm asking him like, "What kind of flash is that?" And he was like, "Oh, it's just a Godox, blah blah blah." And so I was like, I was like, I got to get one of those. And then I was like, I really for festivals, it's a lot of times you're in these environments where you don't have a lot of space and everything looks the same. Sometimes you don't even get an outdoor area. That outdoor area where I took that picture of Pierce the Veil was a corner, and to the right of it, you can't see it, right behind me where I'm taking the picture is a porta potty. So there's not really a lot of options in that outdoor space. But I do recommend reaching out to especially like if you have a media person, a media contact for the festival that's staying in the media tent. A lot
Right.
of times they will allow you, like especially at this festival, they were like, just let us know if you've worked something out to go take pictures beyond the media area with the band, and they will escort you to where you need to be. Of course, you have to work that out ahead of time with either the tour manager or the
Right.
publicist. But you can get some pretty cool shots that way too. Like I got some pictures of Daisy Grenade outside of the media tent where there was like a palm tree. But yeah, I mean, you're kind of limited on location. So one way to kind of spice it up is to have a flash in there. So it definitely helps with making it look a little bit more bold and fun.
I'm curious. So you've got the Godox in the softbox, you've got the tripod handle. So you're holding your camera with one hand, you're holding the softbox, you're not holding it right next to you. I'm assuming you're holding it, pretty,
Hmm.
am I correct? You're holding it to try and get some
Yes.
height to it?
Yeah, I usually will hold it like here and like, and hold it up top and then face it down just a little bit. That definitely helps with shadows. I'm still working it out. My focus is a little like there's some of the portraits I had to go back in and sharpen later because you're kind of
Right.
doing one hand,
And
trying
you're
to make
off
it
balance
work.
holding the thing up
Yeah,
and then you're
and it's
using
hard,
you're
but
using this trigger, right?
yes, correct. Also new to that, I got that for the Godox. I'm learning the whole Godox system. But honestly, it's so amazing to have. Like, I love that. And I love how compact the Angler Fastbox is, how I can literally put it in my backpack and then I can go to the pit and put up my backpack to the side and my Fastbox is in my backpack. That's pretty amazing and small and compact, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
And it looked really easy to handle too. I love the magnetic thing because that's one of the hard things when you're in a hurry and you've got to,
Hmm.
detach things. We just pull it out. So the backstage area, I want to talk scouting for a minute because when we were talking about this shot here, you know, porta potty behind you, this is just a green fence separating areas. This is the reason I wanted to do this show for a long time. And I haven't, the subject matter hasn't hit me until you posted these. And that's what I want to talk about because the run and gun nature of backstage at a festival, and this happens everywhere, right? Wedding photographers do run and gun photos. You may be at a location you haven't done before, and you've got to go shoot the bride by a lake that you've never photographed at the lake before, whatever it is, right? Or downtown somewhere. So this applies to anything, not just music photography. But backstages are cluttered, they're busy. When you're looking for a location, if you are allowed to choose a location, not the normal press tent area, or even in the press tent area, the angle that you're choosing, what is it that you're looking for? When you're taking these types of shots.
I think I'm looking for something like you had kind of mentioned that would be considered editorial, something that they would like to see on a cover or what have you. That's something that I've always, I think, in my personal style of photography, concert photography, is my images, I always want them to look like portraits, because I've always just wanted to do portraits. And so when I finally got the chance to do portraits, I was like, I have to make this work in the limited areas that we have. So, I mean, just kind of making sure and that the hard part too is there's another aspect to this, right? So there's a band, and then, I am me. I'm just a photographer, just a peasant, as I call myself. They are a band. They are the star of the show. I don't want them to feel uncomfortable. I don't want them to be put in weird, cheesy poses. I want them to be able to come to that. Like the Pierce the Veil picture, that was literally them doing that, being silly. That is something that I love, is when it's purely natural. So I kind of let the band kind of play off what's going on. And if you look at the Tonight Alive image, right before that image was taken, um, who was it? It was it Taking Back Sunday? I can't remember who it was. Anyways, there was a band that had come in, and they were just chatting it up, having fun. And they had just, you could tell they were having so much fun chatting it up with the other band. I let them kind of do their thing.
Right.
And then by the time they got to us, or to me, they were all smiles. So it was like, oh, I'm going to work with you now. Like, you let me talk to my friends. Like, let's have some fun now. So I love that. I love it when it's very natural and they're in their element. I did see like another photographer right before I took this picture. They were asking them to kind of like do some weird things, and like hear them say, I don't feel really comfortable doing that.
Right.
So you definitely, I mean, you're going to want to be creative, and obviously sometimes you're going to get told no, and that's fine. But I also kind of want them to feel comfortable. So I try not to ask too much of them, but I also kind of want to get the images right. So I may like place band members in different like locations, and kind of let's mix it up a little bit. Let's change it up a little bit. Y'all do what you want to do, but
Put
change
the
up
lead singer in the
the
back just to be weird. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Because how often, the lead singer's in the front a lot of times, and a lot of the other band members don't really get their roses. They don't get their time to shine.
Right.
So I do like to change it up a little bit.
But what about, okay, so specifically the two shots we've shown are different locations. When you are scouting a location, what if you can't find, open shade or under a cover, and you have this horrible, harsh, it happens, right? Bright sunlight. Do you just go for it and pray? I mean, is there anything you do to try and mitigate that possible nightmare of horrible light?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, having a flash really helps with the harsh sunlight. If you've got that option, if you don't have that option, find ways to kind of make the sun play with the artist. So like maybe you lay on the ground and have them kind of like over you. They're shadowing the sun at that point. And now you've got this really creative image where they can like, put their hand out to you or do something to where it's a little bit more creative. Find your angles to where it will work and be creative. I completely get like not having, a lot of options for spaces. I'll say at When We Were Young Fest, the press tent was full all the time, not just with band members, but like other press.
Right.
And of course they had tables and such. So you're very limited. I remember I had gotten there right as the tent had opened, because I wanted to be there early so I could set up a little spot where I could have my portraits taken. I got there, I went outside to get some shots from fans outside, came back in, and a magazine had set up their like this huge section where they brought in their own backdrop,
Step and repeat.
like completely. Yeah, it was like a blocked out wall. And I was like, okay, well, and then another one had done this corner over here.
God.
And I was like, oh, I'm just running out of space. I have nothing at this point. So luckily for this Taking Back Sunday picture, there was a magazine kind of doing interviews in that corner. They just happened to not be doing an interview at that time. And I politely asked, I was like, do you mind if I really quickly use this corner right here and get some images? And they were like really nice about it. So I was able to get it there for that. And Taking Back Sunday, one of my favorite bands to take portraits of. They are some of the most fun guys, silly guys. I did them actually a portrait of them at We Were Young Fest the first year. Super fun guys. They had a couch in the media area and they were posing all over that couch. It was so much fun.
So, okay. On this shot, do you know your exposure on this shot?
Yes. So the ISO is 1600. f-stop 2.8, 125 shutter, and a 14 millimeter wide. I did pretty much wide everything for the portraits just because of how small a space we had. So one thing I'll say about me, I will keep my f-stop at 2.8.
I was
Like
just
that's
going to
what I try
ask.
to keep it at. Yeah. I don't know why that is. It's just something I've always had a preference for. And I will say that it does cause me grief later on when I go back in and realize, maybe someone's not in focus. And I need to get better about that. But I don't know. Sometimes I really like the f2.8 depth field when it's in the right place. But it is my go-to. And I think when I'm quick and have only a few seconds to do something, I'll just go with what I know, instead of kind of like taking some time to kind of like look at my settings and fix it. So it's easier for me to just go with what I know at that point.
So okay, so this is why I want to do this show, because it's one of the things, the way my mind works, I shoot 2.8 all the time. Now, when I do a trade shot backstage with a venue manager and an artist, they tend to be lined up against the step and repeat. They're all in the same depth of field. It's not a big deal. And even then, a lot of times I shoot those because the manager's in there and the band's, going to matter. I'll shoot them at 7.1, but I'm, backstage and I've got light, right? If I were doing something like this, I would tend to shoot at 2.8 too, or I would, whatever the lens was, wide open. And when you look at this, the one guy in the background is clearly going to be off the plane of focus. So you have to try and get your focus on the right eye that you have enough in front and enough in back. Now, granted, you're at 14 millimeters or whatever here. So it's going to be way more forgiving on the wide angle than if you were, zoomed into 35 or 70 or something like that. But I'm glad to know other people would do it at 2.8 and live with the results. And in most cases, most people wouldn't notice for how, this type of shot is going to show up. Here's another one on the straight wall where this brings in more complexity, because clearly one guy is going to be closer to your flash. He's going to be hotter. Light's going to fall off quickly based on the inverse square law. And then you've got a focal plane issue. They're all pretty much on the same focal, but he's leaning forward, which at 2.8 changes things again. So when you get these folks in here and in your head, you're thinking, or not, I'm at 2.8. I'm hoping they're on the same focal plane. I may rearrange them a little bit, or just say, could you just take one step forward to try and compress the focal plane a little bit? But you have tight schedules. What was your average amount of time with one of these bands?
So I probably could have pushed it to like 5 minutes for some of these, but I think what the tour managers and the bands appreciated most was how quick I was being.
Right.
And that kind of lent me some openness to also get bands that I hadn't even scheduled. So I would say on average, it was I would say about a minute or two, literally a minute at the most. I did for Daisy Grenade. Yes, actually this picture. I was so excited about them. They were one of the bands I was really excited to see at Owyoung Fest. Just because I kind of like discovered them on TikTok, and when I heard they were going to be in the lineup, I was so stoked to see them. And I knew they would pose really well. Like I knew from watching their Instagrams, I knew that they would be so much fun to photograph. I was really excited, but also they were the first portrait of the day. So I hadn't even had a chance to even kind of like test my settings or anything. So for this one, I ended up like taking a bunch of pictures right there. And then I looked at my images, and I wasn't happy with the fact they weren't very sharp. I was very unhappy with how unsharp they were because I hadn't played with my settings enough.
Right.
And I was also trying to manage this softbox that I'd never used before, with one hand and my camera in the other hand. So the tour manager was really super nice, and I went up to him because they were in the press tent for a while. I said, look, I was like, when they're done with all, these interviews and stuff, would you guys care if we took a few more pictures? And he was like, no, that's totally fine. Yeah.
Did you
So he
tell him
gave
why?
Yeah, I told him, I was like, I wasn't really happy with the sharpness on these, and but what was funny was he had actually we had he's like, do you want to do the portraits early since we're already here? So they were earlier than the time slot that I had even had. So to be accommodating, I was like, yeah, sure. Even though in my mind I was stressed to the max, I gotta figure out my settings and all this kind of stuff. And so he was really nice. He was like, look, I rushed you in the beginning. Let's do it. Let's get some more pictures. And turns out I actually ended up liking the first ones more than I did for the second round that I did. So I ended up going with that one.
Yeah, but I love the fact that, again, honest communication. You could have just
Hmm.
said, no, I just, I loved them, loved the first set. Could I just get some more? And a lot of people
Right.
would be afraid to say, effectively, I don't like what I got, which could be translated as I made a mistake, right? And admit to that.
Right.
The fact that you said, I just wasn't happy with how they came out, my sharpness, whatever, I'd like another shot at it. People are people and they want sharp shots, right? I
Hmm.
love the fact, and I will say, this was one of the first shots I saw you post, and I love the grungy kind of lighting here, right? It's almost like a Tiber Jefferson skateboard photography lighting. Very hot on the subject, really quick light fall off, light up very, very high so that their legs are dark. It takes what is a press tent and completely changes the look of it. Like, I love this shot. So I like the way that did you coach or pose or move any of them?
No, that, and I knew it. I knew from
Any of
the
the
moment
bands,
I
not
saw,
just this
like,
band?
oh, not let's see, did I? No, honestly, like I just kind of let them vibe in the moment, and the press tent was such a cacophony of like like noises and bands like that hadn't seen each other in a million years, and they're like, they were so excited to be there and see their friends, and it was just such a happy atmosphere that like everybody was really cool about it, and they were really fun and just happy to be there. So I felt like I didn't have to pose them too much. And Daisy Grenades, especially, like they are on it. They know what they're doing. They are amazing. Was really happy with the way that they pose and changed. It's like they knew every few seconds to change it up. And that's what I loved about them.
As you're shooting, are you thinking like music photographers normally do when we're in a pit, or portrait photographers do? Are you thinking composition at all? Or are you just going center and that's your goal? I mean, is there any creative composition ever in your head, or are you just like, I just want them centered, I can recompose it later? What are you thinking?
I think it depends. So, it depends on like how much time I think I can get with them. I A lot of times when I feel panicked and a little stressed out, like for instance the Pierce Avail one, I knew I had very little time with them, so I just really wanted it to be center on. Didn't want to have to pose them, didn't want to have to talk to them too much because I knew
Right.
their time was very precious. But other portraits at other festivals and things like that, I do try to be creative because ultimately what I want is it's so hard because let's say it's all the checkered wall pictures. That's all you had was a checkered wall. At this point, you now have to change it up so that it doesn't look like they're all lined up on a checkered wall. Like you have to
Like
have
it's a
some sort
red
of
carpet
creativity
shoot.
there.
Yeah.
Right. You have to have some sort of creativity. And I want ultimately it to look like there was more than just that going on. Like I had, like I mean, the checkered
You've got
wall
an
is
angle
in itself.
here, you got a
Yes,
corner, you've got up high framing.
yes. And so I actually watch other photographers too, when they're in their element because I'm still somewhat new to portraits. I didn't start doing portraits till probably about like 6 or 7 years ago. And I try to look at other photographers and see what they are doing. And the fact that one photographer had brought like a backdrop that she basically like clamped to the checkered wall because she wanted it to be anything but what everybody else was getting.
Right.
That's super smart to me. And I'm putting that in my toolbox for next time. Maybe something I can bring something like, I don't want to get so cheesy with props or whatever, but like something that'll make it stand out and be different. I think that's super important.
So you're done shooting, you're culling and processing these photos. First of all, are there any apps that you can't live without? Are you a Lightroom person, Photoshop person?
Lightroom for sure. And then like if I need to do any kind of detail editing, I'll go into Photoshop with that. But I will say there are a couple in there that you can't tell, at least I hope you can't tell from the picture, but the girl that I was telling you about that brought the backdrop is actually on half of that checkered wall. And I had to go in and kind of like mask it out. um,
Oh,
so there's some masking that had to happen in there because we were such limited space. We were like next door neighbors to each other,
right.
and
Especially
um,
shooting wide.
yes, exactly. So and it's funny because there are tables in there for the media to kind of sit at and like rest or have their interviews with bands. So there's a table, a long table that runs right in front of this black checkered wall, black and white checkered wall. So at one point I was on the other side of the table taking pictures with the table beneath me so I could get, the whole band in the image. That's how little space you have
Right.
sometimes. So
So what's your editing process? Like what might you have done to these? Is it basic panel in Lightroom or are you doing complex stuff other than that one masking cloning thing?
I mean, I'm not a very good like editor. I do basic color correction. So what I do love about that black and white checkered wall is that you are able to kind of color correct, kind of almost like a gray card.
Right.
So using that dropper tool to try to color correct was made it a lot quicker. Um, there was I think some of them were kind of off based on skin tones, but that's basically what I do. I just do Lightroom color correcting, and then if there's any kind of sharpening that needs to be done, sometimes in Lightroom, sometimes I'll bring it in Photoshop if it's more detailed.
And then when you deliver your photos to a festival, to a publication, for media, whatever, what is your, I have people ask me this all the time. What is your delivery? So, I mean, are you giving 2,000 pixel images on the long side, 1,000 pixels on the long side? How many images do you give to the festival or the publication? Like what's the quantity that you tend to turn in? And question I always want to know is, do you include license documentation?
Mm. So, typically, okay, it kind of depends on the festival. So I've worked on photo teams where they really just want you to be able to edit very quickly. So you're going to be like pulling in like the smallest, or sometimes even JPEGs. They just want you to have JPEGs, and I
Oh,
hate that. But but a lot of times, a lot of the music festivals that I have worked on besides iHeart, we were editing our own pictures. So we were shooting a set, running to the media tent, editing our pictures and uploading them. Typically in those scenarios, you would only have like a handful from each set. So best of the best. And that is one of the hardest things in my opinion, because I would rather give a bunch and let them pick what they want, but they are on
right.
a time crunch too. So you have to kind of
But that
cull it
is
down to
hard though, isn't it? Because
yes,
like,
it's
I'll
so
give you an
hard.
example for the house places that I shoot. I mean, I've had shows where it's 20 bands and I'm giving them 80 shots, but let's say I give 30 shots and, some of those are venue and some of those are live performance, but let's say I give, there's 3 bands and I give 10 shots for each band. Inevitably, like I started doing it where I would create a separate folder for recommended for social. So I'd give them 30 shots, but I'd recommend which ones I preferred that they use because inevitably I always look at it and go, I gave you 30
Like, why
shots
did
and
you
you
choose that
posted
one?
that one? What the hell, man?
I know. Oh my gosh, that's so smart. I'm gonna have to remember that. I think I will
It,
start doing that actually.
they always pick, and I think it's because they're in a rush and they grab the first 5 that trigger them and they don't, for whatever reason, they don't pick the right ones. Um, what resolution do you submit?
So I think what I so with this festival, I'm actually uploading my own images to the Substream site. So it's just whatever the smallest. I don't know. I usually I'm not a technical person, so when I
Okay.
my out my I guess my Lightroom is like 300. Is it PPI? I almost sound
DPI,
like an
yeah,
idiot.
dots per inch, yeah.
DPI, sorry. And then I
Could
do
be PPI. PPI is only for printing. So,
okay, and then 2000 on the long edge
okay.
typically. So that's usually my output settings for Lightroom.
Yeah, I often do 2,000. Some places I do 1,080. I don't know why I don't do 1,000. I do 1,080. It's just really weird thing for me. So I love these shots. Thank you so much for describing your process through this. Before we finish, I want to switch gears a little bit, and I want to go into a speed round. So I'm going to ask you some questions, and the goal is that first thing that comes to your head, that's the answer.
Okay.
General photography, not music photography. General photography. What's your top photography tip?
Just general photography. Oh, this is hard. Um, just be creative. Just
Oh,
have some fun.
I like that. Okay. Top music photography tip.
Don't be afraid of no.
Oh, good. So good. Okay. Biggest photo mistake you made or almost made?
Ooh, I would. Hmm. I still think about this one shot that I wish I'd gotten. It was Papa Roach, and he had jumped in the air, and I just was down too low, and it would have been the most amazing shot. That was a big mistake for me.
I will say Papa Roach is one of my favorite bands to photograph.
I love Papa Roach.
There was a festival that used to happen before the pandemic in California, in San Bernardino, that was put on actually by ADTR, and I happened to have stage access, and Papa Roach was right before the headliner, and I'll never forget sneaking up, and I'm hiding behind something, and I'm taking a picture of the drummer, and he does this, and I'm like, I don't know how they know, but they just know. It was the weirdest feeling in my life, and I just loved it. Favorite composition rule, if you have one?
Um, don't always stick to rule of thirds. It's
Okay.
okay to be center.
Favorite band or performer to photograph?
Paramore.
I've never done it.
Love
Someday.
Paramore.
Someday. Favorite drink?
Alcoholic or non-alcoholic?
Totally up to you.
Ooh.
I collect whiskey, so
Oh,
everybody that watches this show knows mine's going to be whiskey because I have 211 bottles of whiskey.
I would say my go-to drink when I go anywhere out to eat fancy is probably just a vodka cranberry.
Okay. Favorite movie or TV show?
Movie is Empire Records. I don't know if you can see that.
Good.
Oh, TV show? TV show Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Oh, going back. I have to say, so I had seen the trailer for this show. It's been around for a little bit. It's on Apple TV Plus. I'd seen the trailer and thought, okay, this looks pretty cool. I don't know if it's for me. We were looking for something the other day. We were out of stuff to watch. So my wife and I sat and we watched Dark Matter on Apple TV Plus. One of the most intelligently written, cerebral shows. There were moments where we had to pause it and go, okay, hold on. Let's recap what we've seen here. Let's make sure we understand what we're looking at. And you kind of work your way through it and you're like, yeah, I figured it out. And then so many weak shows, bad shows, you'd watch it and they'd never answer that. This show always, when we hit play again, sooner or later, we'd go, yep, we were right, because they would answer. It's so good. Dark Matter on Apple TV Plus. I'm telling you.
Is it like a horror?
No,
it's like
it's
sci-fi horror?
No, it's a multiverse thriller.
Okay. I'll check that out.
So it's about a guy basically who ends up going into multiple universes with other copies of him, and he's trying to get back home. And it's so hard to describe, but the trailer doesn't do it justice. It's really
okay.
Really
I will check that out.
Yeah, Apple TV Plus, Dark Matter, just so good. Last question: is there any photographer out there that you think more people should know about and follow?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. Skylar Barbie, I'm probably gonna butcher her name, but I only know her by Skylar. I see her a bunch of times. She is one of the sweetest human beings. Skylar Barbiero. She's on tour she did tours with Avril Lavigne.
Yep.
Simple
Plan too, right?
Yes, she's amazing and one of the absolute nicest humans I've ever met in my life.
You know, it's funny. I have met her and I didn't know it. And I wish I had seen her when we were Young Fest, because Adam L. Macias said to me, he said, remember when I did a workshop in San Diego and you came down to help me? I said, yeah. He did a workshop in San Diego, and he called me up and said, do you want to come down and help? And it was me, and it was Anna Lee. And he goes, yeah, Skylar was at that. And
She's
I'm
such
like,
a quiet little mouse. Like, she's just one of the sweetest
she's so
humans.
good though.
She's good. She's so good. Like, there are some, like, even her pictures from Simple Plan at when we were Young Fest, like, I was just blown away.
Yeah, there are people like Todd, yourself, Skylar. One of my favorite photographers is also, I'm lucky to call a friend, Christy Goodwin, out of London. She's the house photographer at Royal Albert Hall.
Oh, nice.
There are certain music photographers that just inevitably inspire me. And there's Connor the Gasky. Do you know Connor?
I've seen his work. He's great.
So Connor has become one of my favorite photographers right now, with what he's doing with Ronnie Radke and Falling in Reverse. He's touring with them. He also did, Boy with Uke? And my God, he's gotten just so good since I first met him. Yeah, I love this. So if people want to find out more about Jenn, what's your website, your social media, stuff like that?
Website is www.jendphotography.com. Facebook and Instagram is just at Jenn D Photography, and then X is Jenn D Photograph, because one less character.
Yeah. You gotta go with what you got. Jenn, again, I so appreciate your doing this. We went long, which I tend to do nowadays, but I really appreciate your taking the time, because you had a work day today and you had to come home. I've never been to New Orleans. Someday I need to. But again, thank you so much. And I hope someday you will come back and do a normal show where we dissect one of your photos. That would be great.
Oh, I would love that. Thank you so much for having me. I am such a fan of your work, and you are so professional in this setting. Like, this podcast is so professional. Like, I've never been on anything like this before.
Well, thank you very much. The pleasure was all mine. Everybody, make sure you go to the website. It's behindtheshot.tv. Find the blog post for this episode. The video is embedded there. You can also find the video on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. But I also have a little bit that I wrote about Jenn, and all the links that we talk about, including the products that we talked about. I will have links to everything in the blog post, to her website, all her social media stuff, et cetera, et cetera. If you are watching on YouTube and you liked what you saw, please hit the like button, hit subscribe, hit the bell so that you get a notification whenever I release a new episode. And again, Jenn Devereaux, I so appreciate everything that you create. And thank you so much for joining me for this show. And to you, please join me next time as we try and get inside the mind of a great photographer by taking a closer look behind the shot.